Good morning, everybody. The UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who doesn't seem to be around that much, has come out of hiding to make an announcement, and it's not a very good announcement. He said that he's going to give 14 British Challenger 2 tanks to the Zelensky regime in Ukraine in order to escalate the conflict there. Now, for the first few months after February, when Russia's so-called special operation, that's what they call it, began, Western powers didn't talk about it in terms of being a war or anything, although they were engaged in some quite hyperbolic and aggressive rhetoric. But now it seems there's no pretense that this is a proxy war between NATO, the collective West, and Russia, which is really not a good position to be taking. But when the announcement was made that he's going to send 14 tanks to Ukraine, this was said in the press release that Britain was now seizing on the moment with an acceleration of global military and diplomatic support to Ukraine. So they're actually specifically saying that they are accelerating the situation here. Now, from the beginning, I've called for a de-escalation in tensions because this whole thing could have been avoided if everybody had stuck to the Minsk agreements, which were put in place in 2014 after the US-backed coup in Ukraine in 2014, where the Yanukovych government was deposed and an American puppet government with Poroshenko was put in place so that Ukraine would sign an agreement with the EU, an economic agreement, and so they would come into a military agreement with the collective West and ultimately join NATO. Now that went, obviously Russia wasn't happy about that. It would be better to have Ukraine being neutral and then over the long term improve relationships and trust between the Russia so that you don't need a buffer zone between two big blocks, two big empires, if you like, really, because that's what we are talking about, empires with a buffer zone. I mean, we really, the best long-term thing would have been to get to a place where you had more trust and cooperation and trade and friendliness between these two big blocks, two big modern empires that exist. But that hasn't happened, and we are where we are. The Minsk agreements were broken. The ethnic Russian areas in the east of Ukraine, in the Donbass, were shelled by Ukrainian forces for 8 years, with the loss of 16,000 or more lives there. And so we are where we are now. We should still be trying to get to a point where this conflict is over, because no conflict can go on forever and ever in perpetuity. It's going to come to an end at some point, one way or the other. The thing is, I want it to end before we all end up blowing each other up with nuclear weapons, because the West has got them, Russia's got them. Ultimately, how far are you going to accelerate this? You know, you accelerate it with giving HIMARS systems to Zelensky, then the Patriot missile systems, and then armored vehicles, and now tanks. Poland's giving 14 Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Germany's considering giving tanks to Ukraine. They've asked for 300 tanks from the West, which one is going to accelerate things again unnecessarily when we should be calming things down. And two, we're giving away weapons which we may need to defend the West, our own countries, if something should happen. I mean, there doesn't seem to be much of an imminent threat now to Western territories and, you know, NATO countries' actual territories, even though there's the conflict and situation in the Ukraine, but you never know what might happen in the future. So the point of having tanks and armory and stores and weapons in your own countries is that if your own country at some point ever gets attacked by somebody unexpectedly, who knows, that something could just come out of the blue. You want to have enough weapons and tanks and aircraft and aircraft carriers and battleships and soldiers and marines in your own country to defend your own country if something should ever happen. That's the whole point. That's the main purpose of having a military and armed forces, not to give all your stuff to another country and another conflict which really shouldn't have or doesn't have anything to do with us, except that we have political leaders which are, for some reason, for one reason or another, involved in buffing up Ukraine. Uniquely among all of the 30 plus conflicts in the world, this is the one that at the moment they are propagandizing, and the mainstream media is propagandizing. You've got to get involved in this. People putting blue and yellow flags in their social media sort of handles and everything to show their support for Ukraine. But the very same people will say absolutely nothing about what's going on in Yemen or Congo or Eritrea or central Nigeria or Honduras. Absolute silence about all those other conflicts, but total focus on what's happening in Ukraine, and a total one-sided narrative coming from the collective West, to the point where they've actually banned Russia Today, a TV channel that used to be broadcast in the UK, and it was very entertaining and gave lots of different opinions, and that's been cancelled. It's even been cancelled on the internet, so no one can access it unless you've got a VPN. So there we are. That's the latest escalation in the Ukraine situation. Now, I'm one of only two political leaders in the UK who are calling for a de-escalation. The other is George Galloway, and I still call for de-escalation and negotiation, simply to stop this crazy killing that is going on with young men from Russia, young men from Ukraine, just killing each other completely unnecessarily for the benefit of the powers that be, because they have their aims, and a lot of it's to do with money laundering, etc., which have got nothing to do with ordinary people, either here in the West or in Russia. And the poor people of Ukraine are being totally trodden on with the jackboots of the American deep state, essentially. And this situation needs to end.